Welcome to the Celtic Exchange Weekly. This is Tino. This week I'm joined by a full house of Miff, James and Paddy as we once again cover all things Celtic. Miff, results at the weekend mean we've now extended our lead to 6 points at the top from Rangers, but we remain locked on 22 points with Aberdeen. Was it a point gained or 2 points dropped against the Dons?
Excuse me, I would say it's a point gain. It's always got to be a point gain. You need to look at it like that. Top of the table clash, maybe didn't go our way. Maybe lessons for us to learn in that, just about our attitude in these games overall, I would say, and how we as a club and a fan base maybe approach them. But overall, it's a point gained because, it amazes me the reaction that you get if you'd went online on Saturday night and you'd listen to some of the nonsense, especially nonsense that was coming from opposition fans rather than our own. There was enough nonsense for our own fans, right enough, but from opposition fans, and the full set of fixtures hadn't been played. Tino, I always find it quite foolish to shoot your bolt too early. So, in my opinion, it was never inevitable that there was, even despite our result, that there was going to be a eating into our lead or Aberdeen's gap at the top of the table. So, not necessarily a satisfactory weekend, because I think we have to look after ourselves first. We don't want to be relying on favours from anyone else, but it's always nice when they do happen.
Paddy, on evidence, we're now 8 league games in, obviously a few League Cup games into the mix, but on evidence from what you've seen, and we've seen at close quarters now against Aberdeen, are they now our genuine title rivals? And I'm not being facetious. We've seen Rangers really poor again against Kilmarnock. There's a mental fragility about Rangers. They knew that there was a chance to close the gap and cut it to 3 points. Couldn't do it, couldn't go over the line. Do you now see Aberdeen as genuine contenders, or do you think they'll fall away? That's a suggestion by some.
Yeah, I do think that we'll still have too much for them in the course of the season. We've got to remember we're competing in all fronts. I think we're looking at the treble. We're looking to see if we can get to a playoff in the Champions League setup and how it stands now. Aberdeen, credit to them. I think 2-0 down. And then to go and come back and make it 2 each is they'll take a lot of confidence from it. Do I feel that Celtic should have scored more? Yeah, I do. I think we could have as well. I don't think there was much there from Aberdeen from what I think was enough to really worry me in terms of the longevity of a full season. Does it stay that way? Do they continue to play that way for the remainder? It will be interesting to see them keep up. One thing I would say though is this manager is I don't think he's going to get caught out in too many of the games that could be banana skins for them in the rest of the league. We see so many times season after season teams that will come and get a good result against Celtic or Rangers, and then they go and lose the following week to a team that's struggling or along those likes. But they seem well organised, so I do think that they will be there or thereabouts. But it's up to Celtic then to go and beat them in the games we're going to play against them this season. And I do think we're too good for them. I do.
And we've got one of those games in a couple of weeks' time. We've got the League Cup semi, which I think will be interesting in itself. James, what about Jimmy Tilleen's Aberdeen? Question I asked Bridle last night on the post-match. Are they the real deal based on what we've seen? What do you think?
I think they're the real deal within themselves. I mean, they're a world away from Aberdeen's of recent years, and no harm to the likes of Barry Robson and stuff, big fan, but it just seems to have got them organised first and foremost. They didn't panic when, after the first goal, they were just caught a wee bit, behind the headlights, and they lost the second. But they didn't panic then. They reorganised, got themselves back into shape, and they just kind of kept going about their job and kept trying to get forward. I thought the 2 subs coming on at half time really boosted them, but looking at it in the round, it didn't really give them much in the way of statistical advantage. We had 70-80% possession in the second half. We just didn't finish our dinner.
14% for Aberdeen.
It's the lows that, so 86, right? So we just didn't finish our chances. So more clinical finishing from Celtic, and I think we take that game away. But when they did get their chances, they took them. So they're definitely going to be up thereabouts. Having watched Kilmarnock Rangers yesterday, it was, let's be very generous and say the weather played a part. It's one of the worst games of football I've seen in years. 2 very bad teams, and if Rangers are that bad, Aberdeen will absolutely destroy them in 2 weeks, or a week on Wednesday.
Yeah.
Oof. Couple of pub teams slugging out yesterday.
It was,
James and I watched that in let's call it a neutral bar in Belfast just before we headed back for a flight. And I'm going to ask you just on that then, it was genuinely very poor, right? We'd probably joke about it anyway, but at one point I said to the boys there, have a look and tell me the next time you see any of the two sides string together as many as 4 passes. It was pass at the park, pass, tackle, pass, whatever. It was really turgid stuff from both sides actually, and obviously delighted Kelly done what they've done. They've gone on heavy on social media, by the way. Have you seen that?
She's
not hanging back. Not hanging back.
They've posted a great picture of, I don't know, is it Sammy the Squirrel or something? That's their guy. Kind of just lording it over. Clement, it's good fun, good to see. Question for you then, and I'm being facetious, but I'm asking it anyway. Will Rangers get a top 6 finish this season?
I mean, Motherwell United are breathing down their necks. Dundee United and Aberdeen play weekend. Aye, so that gives Rangers a bit of respite, because if Aberdeen and Dundee United were playing independently on lower teams and Rangers were to draw points, they'd be 4th, and then Motherwell nipping at them could be 5th.
Is that a new firm derby?
It is now, aye.
It's back.
A new
firm,
aye.
Back.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
So
Scottish
it's a great advert for Scottish football.
they'll finish. I think they'll finish 3rd or 4th. I don't think they'll finish 2nd.
Who was that meant to be?
Just me, doing a funny voice.
Generic Scottish
I
football
didn't
voice.
say hello to everybody.
You didn't?
Oh.
I tell you what, while you're saying hello, it'd be remiss of us, we're about 6 minutes into the show, it'd be remiss of us not to talk about the new studio. We could have just done the whole thing and just ignored it and seen what happened. So, a couple of finishing touches to come, but for anyone, any regular viewers watching on YouTube, if you're listening, you can hear the new studio in the background, but if you're watching on YouTube, you'll see it. And it's taking shape nicely, Miff. What do you think?
It's fantastic, and I'd like to say, there's been a lot of hard work went into our studio, and I have contributed absolutely zilch. So fair play, lads. It looks fantastic.
What I would expect
Absolutely
for you.
fantastic.
Yeah.
Miff, you're the talent. Just
the face.
Play to your strengths, do what you're good at. On that, Miff, I'll come to you again. So Celtic have played 12 competitive games so far this season, 8 in the league, 2 in the League Cup and 1 in the Champions League. We conceded just 2 goals from the opening 7 fixtures. I think it was 1 against Hibs in the League Cup and 1 against Slovan Bratislava in the 5-1 win. We have now conceded 12 goals in our last 5 games, and of course Dortmund accounts for 7 of them. But what do you make of that pattern?
I think that the pattern just screams to me, Rodgers out. Listen, Vickers is missing. It's huge for us. And if you want to play the brand of football that the manager does, we play with a high line. You need Vickers as your insurance policy within that high line.
Remember at the start I says don't talk about Vickers too much because we're going to cover him in detail in part 2.
But you asked me a direct question to do with statistics, and
You could have
To be fair, you spoke about the defence.
You could have swerved round it.
He did ask you a defence
Aye.
question.
There's a guy missing, but more on that later. Stay tuned. Hell, man. Right.
So without getting into CCV too much, what do you think?
What would I say about that pattern? I think we've just had some difficult games, to be perfectly frank. The Dortmund game was always got to be tough. Probably how we played and how we went about it didn't help massively with that. I would say against Aberdeen, we've come up against a team who are also in form, like ourselves. They've taken their chances against us. We are a team that can give away, even at home, some chances through our own sloppy play or through how adventurous we try to be. We're susceptible to being hit in the break, and we're also missing some important players as well.
Yeah, more of that later.
Aye.
James, what do you think though? Is it just the way the season's panned out? It was really impressive defensively. Kasper Schmeichel doing his thing, keeping several clean sheets at the start. But is it a concern? Dortmund is a bit of an outlier, but even that aside, we're still conceding more than we were domestically. So what do you think?
I think Dortmund's outlier, but it's also the reason. I think it has affected players in terms of their confidence in going about their business, because no player ever likes to be on the end of a 7-1 doing.
A shellacking.
A shellacking.
Good word.
But they shouldn't be taking that to the next game, and you certainly shouldn't be taking it to the game after that. And I think we have. I think the first half on Saturday was as professional as it could be. They just went about their business, got their 2 goals in at half time. And I don't know, they thought that maybe a wee bit job done kind of thing. There was a lot more to be done there. And that's maybe just a wee bit of, mental hangover from Dortmund. So the issue, I don't have an issue with 7-1s apart from the fact...
I've got a big issue with 7-1s.
Apart from that, not in a tournament as long as you qualify through the group. But the issue I do have is when it starts to impact on your players' mentality. And that's key for Wednesday night in Atalanta.
I think we've been guilty of that before though. Like, see, in terms of taking that 2-3 goal lead and taking the foot off the gas, I think a couple of times against Rangers last season we've done the same thing, and then the goal comes in and we're on on edge.
Three each game.
Aye. We're on edge for the remainder. I think there needs to be an element of our manager taking responsibility there and making sure that the guys are switched on to see the game out. Miff, don't get too carried away.
I like this.
Don't get too carried away. It's game management. We've spoke about it before. We spoke about it when we were under a lot of pressure last season as well. You don't want those moments creeping in again. But we have to also look at it on the other side. Miff, 8 games, 7 wins, 1 draw in the league is absolutely brilliant for this stage of the season.
Miff, do you think there is, to James's point, a Dortmund hangover? So we concede a goal at Ross County, but eventually come good. Late winner from Nicholas Kuhn. We then concede 2 at home. Rarely concede 2 goals domestically at home, although Falkirk done it as well. And eventually we don't get the win. We have to settle for the draw. Do you think the Dortmund result has maybe lingered a wee bit?
Potentially, but you also need to credit the opposition to a degree as well. Whilst we had that strong start to the season, that generally will level out over the course of the season. I think, was it the season under Lennon, when Van Dijk played his first full season? I think we only conceded something like 14 goals in a season. Obviously Rangers weren't in the league at that time either. You'll go through the season and you'll concede your fair share of goals. I think it's just kind of came in a clump over a few games, but I wouldn't be overly panicking about it. I think the more galling point for me is we just miss a hell of a lot of good chances, and it's not down to any one individual, but we're really, really good at creating openings in games. And if you look back over the past 18 months, 2 years, the games that we have dropped points, we've had more than enough chances in them to win them. So I think it's just as much about conversion of chances for me as it is keeping the back door shut.
Kyogo's had that huge chance at 2-0. Arne Engels has played him in. I thought he should have taken it. Here's me giving Kyogo striking advice. I thought he should have taken it on his right foot and just tucked it away first time. He's tried to cut back. The chance is lost. And there's a couple of real big chances at the end. Obviously, Adam Ida has a powerful header, point blank range, great save. And then Alistair Johnson's effort, which is blocked on the line. I'll ask you quickly, penalty or not, Duke's save on the line?
I think it's a penalty.
Do you?
I think he's motioned his body towards it, in my opinion.
Do you think his hands touched it?
I just think obviously he's kept his arms in, I understand that, but he has moved towards the ball with the arm being the closest area to it. They're saying it's hit his stomach. I think it's a penalty for me.
Penalty or not?
Penalty. I just think Duke's a really good keeper.
Aye.
Great save.
The angle his chest is to the ball doesn't go back that way. I think he's hit up his arm and it's gone back out. If it hits his chest, it's getting at the goal. Well, the big issue is we haven't got the technological setup to be able to tell for sure, and we absolutely should have. That's a crucial element of the game.
Correct.
My gut is it's a penalty, and the angles I've seen, you can see angles that show it wasn't, but others that do.
You said the word there, which means for me they couldn't give it. Your gut is you think it's a penalty, but unless it's conclusive,
Aye. No,
if you cannot see it in the hand,
why isn't Wall seeing it? But what was he looking at if he wasn't looking at that?
It's going at a pace. There's a lot of bodies in there. We've watched that in Nancy Mulligan's in Belfast, lively pub, good fun for the Celtic games. And you're thinking, this is great. Penalty, absolute stonewaller. That was the first reaction. Me and Sinky also had a bet on Adam Ida, next scorer, betting in play. So you're thinking he'll step up here. And then next thing you see is Walsh just calling it, saying it's time. I've since seen several angles, and inconclusive is my response. And maybe you're right, maybe that's
What's your gut?
Well, my gut says possibly, probably. but don't really know. But seeing the angles I've seen, you can't tell for sure. And if the VAR officials and the ref can't tell for sure, you can't give a penalty. And that's why I think that's why the game's ended as it has. I'll move on to another question. Shane O'Sullivan, good friend of the show, based in Boston, he's been in touch by email this morning. And he's suggesting that a big reason for the win is that we haven't or didn't manage our international players correctly ahead of that one. And I think specifically it's in reference to the Japanese boys. So Hatate and Maeda were out there travelling thousands of miles, somewhere between 10 and 15,000 miles for their 2 games. Maeda, I think, got half an hour off the bench in game 1, and that's it for him and Hatate. Hatate gets 0 minutes for the second time in a row. He travelled out in the September break. Hatate, according to reports, has travelled 30,000 miles in the last 2 international breaks to play 0 minutes of football. And on that basis, surely you come back quite fatigued and actually a wee bit down. Maybe Rodgers has thought Hatate will have a point to prove, but to my thinking, the sports science would maybe saying those guys are a bit fatigued. Maybe they need a rest. And Hatate, good as he was, I thought in the first half, faded. And I think Maeda had one of his poorest games in a while.
Well, you're just back for that part of the world. How are you feeling?
I couldn't have played on Saturday.
Couldn't have played. Such a letdown. Such a letdown.
If selected.
Aye.
It's exhausting though. Like,
of course it is.
Our flight back from Japan was a 15-hour flight. Yeah, and I dare say the boys weren't in the same class of seating that we were in, but it's 15 hours regardless. Kind of thing. It's a long travel. The chat is that Hatate has sought out the manager. So what's his name? Hajime Moriyasu. Sought him out for private discussions. But it remains to be seen. What are you going to say? Don't pick me next time. You want to represent your country. They will most likely go to the World Cup. So they drew one each with Australia, which I'll get to in a second. A game we were at, but he also doesn't want to travel halfway around the world for nothing. You can see the dilemma there.
You can, but at the same time, if he turns around and says, I don't want to travel halfway around the world, then he's not going to the World Cup.
Yeah.
Simple as that.
They'll make it easier for him.
Yeah. And that's where maybe, he has to think about, his next move in his career. There's nowhere in Europe that he can go that he's going to avoid that. Listen, get better, get in the starting lineup and make it worthwhile.
Play better. James, there's a quote read out first before coming to you. Brendan Rodgers, he says, I knew we weren't going to be perfect with guys travelling all the way around the world with miles in their legs, but I still expect us to be better, and we will be. Do you think it was a wrong call, though, to pick the two guys?
I think he's also managing Hatate's state of mind, not being picked for Australia. And if Rodgers then doesn't pick him, he's thinking, well, this guy doesn't fancy me as well. So I think he was right to pick him, but then you've got to keep a really close eye on him. And if he's not hitting the levels, get him off, because we've got quality options there. I thought that McCowan was the bright spark when he came on Saturday, so that's a good drive in midfield you can bring on for a tie there. Even if it's just immediately on half time, say, great run out, that's you're back to fitness, or you're back in the team. Luke's going to come on for you at half time. Maeda, he's always the best option, but for the same reasons, or for different reasons, but for the same a judgment of his performance, you go, it's not really happened for you first half, we're going to change it up. But I thought Jamesy turned in one of his worst performances at Celtic in a long time on Saturday. I thought it was very, very poor.
I'll come to you for that as the James Forrest correspondent.
Again, I think Maeda for me is the absolute key to a fluent Celtic performance, because he affects so many other areas on the pitch. And Jamesy isn't Maeda. Dare I say, Jamesy's somebody that you're bringing on to manage a game rather than chase a game, or chase points as it would be at that time. Different characters for different situations, I would say there. Atate's an interesting one, because you would never have conceived a Celtic starting 11 without a minute, even 2-3 months ago, but now you probably could. And I think that maybe it is the situation with the international team is actually starting to catch up with his Celtic career now as well. But it's a long way to go to play zero football. Yeah. A long way to go, and hopefully that's a situation that can be resolved. But look at the Kyogo situation, the fact that he's banging the goals in, he's playing in the Champions League and he's not getting selected.
I was keen to touch on that, right? So as I mentioned, I was at the game, Japan v Australia, big qualifier. There's a big rivalry between those two sides out there, kind of probably the two biggest sides out there in Asia. It was a 1-1 draw at the Saitama Stadium, huge arena, 67,000, great atmosphere. Japanese football fans are very unique, hugely respectful, when it came to the anthems and polite applause and all that stuff, and then going bananas at other times. It was interesting to see. And I've often questioned why Kyogo doesn't play for Japan, because, as you say, he bangs in the goals, and some of the goals he's scored are first class for Celtic, world class goals. And I'm thinking, how is he not getting a game there? And as much as they drew the game 1 each, Japan's forward line in particular is seriously talented. So, I mean, some of the names here. So, Matoma, that we know from Brighton, he plays out on the left. Minamino, ex-Liverpool, now at Monaco. Ueda at Feyenoord, I don't know if you've got knowledge of him. He's our number 9 and he's excellent. And they brought on a guy called Keito Nakamura. He plays for Reims in France. Don't know if he's related. A lot of Nakamura's out in that part of the world. But he was the guy that created the equaliser for Japan. And I thought they were all exceptional. They're technically a very good side. They play it about. They don't lump it long. They play in small areas and try and break at pace. And actually, on seeing it at first hand, I can kind of see why Kyogo doesn't get in that side. I thought they were seriously talented there. And whether he gets back in it, what is he, 29 now, nearly 30?
Going to be 30 next month.
I'm not sure. I think it's a long way away from him potentially getting back, at least under this manager. So it's interesting. It was an interesting game to see, but yeah, it kind of shed a bit of light for me on why he maybe doesn't feature at this moment in time. But as you say, just to conclude on Hatate, long way to go for 0 minutes, and you can see the frustration. We've covered the post-match, the draw with Aberdeen in full on the final whistle show, myself and Bridal. We don't have a post-match for Japan v Australia, Paddy. You need to look that up online yourself.
That's fine.
I think we've just had one.
I think we did.
But the Aberdeen one, that's available right now wherever you get your podcast. We'll take a short break, and when we come back, we'll cover a question about the missing link in Celtic's defence. Welcome back, folks. Before we move on with part 2 of the show, Paddy, there's a couple of guys that you want to give a special shout out to.
Yeah, just thanks to Connor last night coming up and speaking to me in Herity's best Guinness in Glasgow. He basically just was grateful for the show, just saying for the work that we've put in, so it really means a lot. And we thank any of the guys that come and say thanks for what we're doing. We love doing it, as you guys know. So yeah, Connor, I hope you enjoyed your trip up to Glasgow and safe travels back home. Condolences also to the Mallon family. There's a guy, John Mallon, I worked with for a long time, and just somebody who you'd go into on a Monday, talk about the football, and we had some really good years to talk about from 2012 onwards. So sadly John passed away, and just want to know, for everyone to know that I'm thinking about him in the team as well. Good guy.
Nice one, Paddy.
Thanks, Paddy.
Condolences from all of us to John's family. We'll move on with the second part of the show, and as you lads know, we usually cover a listener's question, and I've taken a question from some of the comments that came out of the post-match last night, the Aberdeen post-match recording. As I've mentioned a couple of times now, there was a very obvious component missing from Celtic's defence right now, and of course that is Cameron Carter-Vickers. A few comments here. Daniel Henderson, Daniel's a good friend of the show, he said there's a pattern developing every time CCV's out the team. P. McLaughlin added that these 12 goals conceded in 5 games that we spoke about, they coincide with CCV's absence, which is pretty apparent.
Is that P for Patrick or P as in Garden P?
I don't know, it's just P.
Right.
That's his handle. Okay. And James Quinn, he simply said CCV is the missing link. So I'll come to you first, Muff, and to kind of frame the question. Despite the work that was done in the summer transfer window, we obviously brought in Austin Trusty. Do Celtic struggle notably when Cameron Carter-Vickers isn't in the side, and are we far weaker without him?
Yes.
Cool.
That was a great section.
What we do now? Could you elaborate, Muff?
Yes, we are. The players that we've got aren't as good as him, and he has some fairly unique characteristics which others don't have, mainly pace, but also a bit of power about him as well. So you can see that the skills has improved massively. I think everybody, he got a hard time last season, at times rightfully so. This season he's had some tough games, but I think he stood up to most of it very well. And with Trusty, whilst he seems to be a bit of the scapegoat at the minute between Dortmund and the Aberdeen game, you need to remember he's new arrival, not had a lot of game time, and it will take him a while to settle in. So if you use the theory that it took Scales maybe a year to become a fully fledged Celtic player, then you'll need to allow a bit more time for Trusty as well, albeit he's a bit more experienced in terms of game time and internationals and things like that. But for us, Carter-Vickers is pretty much irreplaceable. So when it comes to your starting 11, strongest starting 11, and he's not in it, the team's going to be weaker. It's just the way it is. Now, I would say that we should have probably, for a long time now, we've never really replaced Starfelt, have we? And he was the number one partner for Vickers, and the stats of them playing as a pairing stand up to massive scrutiny. We never get a chance to play them together in Europe very often either, which was a reason why we conceded so many in Angie's second season in Europe. So for me, the stats bear it out. We need Vickers in the team. The problem is that in the past 18 months he's actually missed quite a lot of football. So the theory is that I think we need, that's the area we really need to spend big on. Like, as in spend big and bring in someone that's actually better than Carter-Vickers rather than players to play round about.
Yeah, don't spend big for a backup.
Yeah.
There is some stats about those last 18 months or so, and I'll get to them just shortly, but James Smith's suggesting that we might need to wait a bit of time to see the best of Austin Trusty, but we've paid $6 million for him, so spending that kind of money is fairly substantial for Celtic. You'd kind of expect him maybe not quite to hit the ground running, but to show up a wee bit better than we've seen.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly not working for me at the moment. I don't see anyone at European level at centre half at Celtic Park, Carter-Vickers. And the Carter-Vickers situation, if you look back to last year, was that he was potentially going to take a move, but his knees have precluded that. So we were now playing with a player who maybe is managing out his career, which would be devastating for everyone, not least the player himself. Big fan, everyone is, and he is the class player that we want everyone to aspire to or to even improve upon. Scales isn't it, Trusty isn't it. So I think we've got a big problem in our hands here. Because if Carter-Vickers can't get fit and the other two aren't good enough for European level, then we're not at European level.
I would still say it's very early in Trusty though. I know where you're coming
Have you
from.
seen signs?
No, I've not seen enough. I haven't seen enough, but I also look at where he's played previously with Sheffield United, and again a Sheffield United that was relegated.
That's what worries me, Paddy. Is that defence was so bad and he was part of it.
I get that, but we're looking at a guy who is also playing in the opposite side of defence again, and yeah, maybe he's not at the level that's required as of yet, but I don't think Cameron Carter-Vickers was when he was out on loan before making the move to Celtic at that point. I think Carter-Vickers found that level eventually, and it comes then down to confidence. It comes down to confidence in the player. This is a guy who's been ran ragged in Dortmund because he was so exposed from a midfield as well. You need to remember that. And I just feel that he's not on his comfortable side. He's not on the right side yet. So until he gets that opportunity on that left-hand side, I'm going to hang fire on it. I'm not confident, but I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt. In terms of Carter-Vickers, you mentioned it. If he doesn't injure his knee, he's not playing with Celtic.
Of course, he was gone last season.
Yeah, that is the reason.
He wouldn't be extended.
That's the reason we got the contract extension. I think as fans that, I've seen so many people firing out with his sick note and he's not there for us and stuff like that. He's our best defender, but I agree. I think we really need to think about what we're going to put out money-wise to bring in someone of a similar level, if not better.
I'm going to add fuel to that fire in terms of quote-unquote the sick note suggestion, because I looked up his stats just this afternoon on transfermarket.co.uk, and it's more dramatic than I thought in terms of what he's missed. I'll get to it in a second. Just on Austin Trusty though, I think half a dozen games into his Celtic career in the wrong position. Has he played left centre half at all yet?
No.
I think there's got to be a wee bit of leeway.
Against Falkirk?
Don't think so.
No.
Did Welsh not play with him? Welsh on the right and him on the left against Falkirk?
Okay.
And he was pish.
But for the most part, he's to an extent out of position, and I think there's got to be a wee bit of leeway and maybe a bit of time to settle. He's only a year or so younger than Carter-Vickers. So Carter-Vickers, he'll be 27, I think, in December. In terms of his stats, so for Celtic, in all competitions, he's played 122 games, 6 goals, 2 assists, 15 yellow cards, no red cards. His league appearances, though, in the 3 or so seasons, decent numbers, 92. But he's missed 25 league games for Celtic, and I think most of them are through injury. He'll have been rested once or twice, but you can look through the games that he's missed, and he's missed 25 games, which feels like quite a lot. Champions League-wise, of the 14 Champions League games we've played since he signed, he's now missed 5 of them, including the Dortmund game most recently. And Miff, he is one of our best players, and he's certainly a first name in the team sheet, and we're a far better living with him in it. But if you start to miss that many games and you need these big hitters for the Champions League, if Celtic are to have any chance of progression, whether it's through the playoffs or otherwise, we need our strongest 11. I think Celtic generally right now have got a pretty strong 11, 12, 13, but when you have to go to the reserves, I wonder if the gap is too big when it comes to taking out Carter-Vickers.
Yeah, and the nature of it is that, I think we need better than Scales, for example. That was what I'd hoped for in the.
What do you think of the improvement in Scales? And he has improved. I think we can all see that. Has he improved enough? Has he got more improvement to make?
I suppose that's yet to be seen, I would say. He's improved massively, and I think it's all credit to him. But my hope was that we were going to bring in better than Liam Scales, and to my eyes, as of yet, Trusty doesn't look like he is that. If Vickers is back, are you launching Scales out the team for Trusty? I don't think you are.
No, you're not.
No.
So this is my point. It's a very Celtic thing to do. How bad must Lagerbielke and Nawrocki be in training? Because in the games that I've seen them play, they've not looked that bad. It's a very odd situation, the centre half.
They're not robust enough for a physical game. That's the big problem. They keep breaking down. They can't get through.
I got Belkin's away now on loan, isn't he?
Yeah.
Aye,
Still,
but my point is,
general.
you know,
Yeah.
it was a situation that seemed to be under control.
They both seem technically gifted, but physically lacking. That seems to be the problem.
I think Trusty looks physically enough, but
No, Lagerbielke and Nabrowski.
aye, to that point. Trusty, again, speaking to Bridle in the post-match, he's got pace and power, but it looks like his reading of the game isn't what you would hope, and maybe it is just that he's in that alien position to him out on the right-hand side, but it's not hugely encouraging.
I'm not buying that for centre halves. A centre half should be able to play either side.
I think so.
Played left for the whole time.
A good centre half, you've paid £6.5 million for an international centre half. You should be able to play either side.
I would disagree in terms of who we are signing with. I think for me, listen, we got
No, I'm talking about any level.
No, I know, but we're talking about Celtic getting into Europe level. That's what we're trying to compete in, and that's what we're trying to get better in. So I think for us to get a centre half at that quality that could play left or right,
we should have paid more.
Is someone like Cameron Carter-Vickers, right? But the reason we signed Cameron Carter-Vickers for $6 million is because of the injuries that he's had and the injuries that could have came down the line as well. I think that if we sign someone like Cameron Carter-Vickers that's going to remain fit, you're at least double what we paid for him. We're not going to do that. Trusty was an option at the late stages of the window, again due to poor scouting and poor transfer business from us in that front. Now, I think that what we need to realise is that we need players playing in the right position to have any chance to compete at that level in Europe. Look at that midfield. Look at the front three of Dortmund and how easy it was to get through us. I generally think
Part of that's tactics, so.
No, but part of it's tactics, but also you still have a fighting chance and you still hope for more for your back four in that position as well. And I still don't think that Austin Trusty had any chance being on that right-hand side against a player that was quite happy, cutting in, cutting out. He was nowhere near it. It's different when you're on your more comfortable side. I know what you're talking about with the quality, and in the league should be fine in the league, but in Europe it's
the
different.
flip of it is that if for any reason your team went 3-5-2 and you picked the team and you said to Austin Trusty, you're going to be my middle centre half, that would require you to come out on the right hand side and on the left hand side. And if you're at a certain level, you should be pretty comfortable at doing that. You're obviously going to be stronger on one side or the other, but what you're seeing just now is he's extremely uncomfortable looking. A big part of the centre half job at Celtic is distribution of the ball, and he comes out and he's angling his body that kind of awkward way. It's not quite.
Is this the first bit of smoke for the football doctor?
I just scribbled his name down. Paul Tisdale, confirmed as head of football operations. Where does he fit in the mix? We'll cover it briefly. Where do you see him doing his doctoring?
Well, I don't know. I mean, you would imagine that he was privy to the opportunity, Trusty being available. Like I say, my biggest concern with Trusty is he was part of the worst defence that Premier League's ever seen. So that can create a bit. Well, it's one of, if not the. So that'll create a bit of scarring. So mentally, you know, it's probably he did have a season in the Championship after that, I think. Or he played a bit of football in the Championship after that. But to spend £6 million on somebody with that profile when we were going into a European campaign, that in itself, now I might be doing the player a massive disservice here, but that in itself isn't screaming to me the profile of the type of player that we should have been after.
But that's a Rodgers thing as well. He likes to shop in England. You know, I think it's a problem for us.
He does, but that's kind of what I'm going back to in terms of his signing a player that's going to be the calibre of Cameron Carter-Vickers. You're talking 12 plus. Like six,
exactly.
So 6 actually isn't that bad in the grand scheme yet. Is what
my point is we should be spending £12 million.
I agree.
I'd spend 12 good and 6 bad, because we'll spend another 6 to try to fix it.
100%.
I mentioned Daniel Henderson in the comments for this question, and
D Henderson.
His full name,
right.
Daniel Henderson. And Daniel he's got quite some strong opinions on various things, and he left quite a long comment on the post match, and he was talking about the fact that he was far from convinced about the quote unquote good work that was done in the transfer window. I think we were all quite happy because you got Engels over the line, you broke your record and stuff. But I think he sees areas of weakness. And I mean, to look at our centre halves right now, it's CCV, it's Scales, Trusty, Nawrocki and Welsh. And if you're looking to compete on all fronts, including Champions League progression, from what we know, the evidence we've got, it's not good enough, is it?
One guy is good enough and he's no fit.
So little wonder you're going to struggle.
But I think it's very, like, there was a lot of fans after that window saying good business, good summer. There's still a lot of fans also saying we're still light in some positions.
I'd say that's as light as an area we've got.
But also in our wings as well. I still don't think that what we've got coming on is going to take us
I
forward.
agree.
And
And
scoring.
When Maeda and Kuhn aren't doing it, and they didn't particularly do it at the weekend, have we got enough in reserve? James Forrest, we can't keep going back to James Forrest.
can't.
Well, good as he's been at times, and credit where it's due. And we really don't know about Yang and Palmer, do we? The jury remains out. I think they're both decent, by the way, but the jury remains out.
I think they're both
across the
duds.
board.
So if we look at the signings, Sinisolo, we can't really judge by. We're happy with him.
Aye. I think it's
As a solid left back,
He's a good footballer,
I think
but
he's a
whether
great
he's
footballer.
a great defender, although he
Aye.
done some really good work covering at the weekend as well.
one of the boys, Tam, made a good point though. Like, are we looking at him as our player for next season, or do we really need to start looking at a left back?
I would like to think and hope that Paul Tisdale with Brendan Rodgers is looking at all areas, including
Like any good doctor would.
you'd be looking at the very real prospect of Baye either returning to Barca or more likely moving elsewhere within Europe. And the work on a new left back, I'd like to think it's already started. You know, they must be looking at those areas. But I mean, to Paddy's point though, centre half is seriously light. You know, there's no getting away from it, and it's a weakness, and you're going to concede in Europe at that level.
Light and quality. We've plenty of bodies there. It's light and quality.
And all the time, there's every possibility we could be getting into a big game with Stephen Welsh playing.
Well, that's the thing.
Which should be a position we shouldn't, quite simply should not be in.
Yeah, and we've covered this. You know, we've spoken about the fact that
And that's no harm to Stephen Welsh, by the way.
Oh,
I
I know
have
what you
nothing
mean.
against that. I just mean in terms of the underlying quality that we need within that squad, that it would be potentially Scales would be your fourth centre half. That's, you know, as low as a bar you would be willing to go in quality, so that you could put Scales into any game,
yeah,
and you know he'd give you 100% and he'd give you a certain level of quality. You don't get that of Stephen Welsh. And again, if you talk about players breaking down, how many injuries has Stephen Welsh had?
he's had a
For
few.
a centre half, he's had a terrible time with injuries, so you know that his body's probably struggling to cope with playing a lot of games in a season. With Navrocki, can only assume he's got some compromising pictures of Rodgers for the fact that he's not been given a run of games.
he doesn't have compromising pictures in. He can't get a run of games.
Aye, that's what I'm
That's
saying.
not how you blackmail somebody.
Is it?
It's the other way about.
Well, actually, so we'd be keeping about. But what's he done then?
Aye, just make something up.
Aye,
Come back to that
I'll
one.
come back. I'll come back to that one.
Working
I
on
think
that.
it's some
Part that.
salacious
Part that.
rumour about Navrocki. But to my eyes, anytime I've seen Navrocki play, I know what you're saying about the physical element, but you know, he's a big lad. If he's playing with Vickers does the covering. I don't think he's just not had a run. Maybe it's because his body can't give him a run, and that's different.
We wouldn't have signed Trusty if we thought he could make it. I think we tried to get him a move in the summer, it didn't work out.
But that's there you go. Just what you said earlier on. That's 5 million on Navrocki and now 6
Yep.
million on Trusty.
Yep.
And that's 11 million.
11 million for
Yep,
two guys.
That's the point. Just
11
spend the
million
money.
for two guys we suspect aren't going to be good enough, and that's
Half the wages.
this is a problem that you've got. I think generally speaking, if we include Carter-Vickers being fit and available, we've got decent guys, pretty decent level as first choice for each position across the park. But in some areas, particularly centre half here, the gap is big when you go to your reserve guy.
And we see that.
Navrocki puts salmon in the microwave
There
at
you
Lennox
go.
Town.
That's
what
it.
it does.
I knew it. James, your final thoughts on the comments and questions regarding how weak or weaker we are without Carter-Vickers?
I think they're very valid, and I think, you know, mitigating circumstances for Trusty and Dortmund with how exposed he was. But at the same time, I think Carter-Vickers stops a couple of those early goals, you know,
Maybe.
and you know, gets us into half time with, you know, something to cling on to, or something at least. So I think all the comments are very valid. I think it's the screaming problem at Celtic at the moment, not for domestic but for Europe. So it remains to be seen how far we can go in Europe with the talent at our disposal at the moment. All we can hope is that Carter-Vickers, you know, there was talk he was maybe going to come back on Saturday there. I think it would be maybe a wee bit foolish to bring him back on Wednesday, but you could see it as well because he has that. But I think we've got to manage him back, and then I think we've got to manage him going forward. I don't think we can play him week in, week out. You've got to just keep him for a game before the big game and the big game and a rest, that kind of cycle.
See, just the last point on his injury record, do you think, I suppose it might seem obvious that he's injury prone, but they're very different types of injuries. You know, he had his knee injury for a long time. I think he missed the cup final against Inverness, among some other games towards the end of last season, or the season before, the one just finished. This injury is a toe injury, so kind of nothing to do with anything, maybe just a bit of bad luck.
Hammy, he's had a bad hammy injury as well.
But it's all interconnected. When you start getting operations in that area, knee bone to connect to the shin bone, all that kind of stuff.
Turns out there's another doctor in this.
I do have a sore foot just now because of my ankle issue.
The football locum.
I Tight hammy because of it, Miff.
We'll move on. Thanks to Daniel Henderson, P. McLaughlin, James Quinn and others for their ongoing comments and engagement on YouTube. If you want us to cover your questions on next week's show, then it couldn't be easier. Just visit our website at thecelticexchange.com. Click the send voicemail button on the bottom right of the page. Record your question and we could be featuring you in the show this time next week. Alternatively, you can just email me, Tino at thecelticexchange.com, if you'd prefer to submit your question that way. Let's take another short break. When we come back, we'll do this week's Mystery Goal Scorer. Welcome back, folks. We'll begin the final section of this week's show, as always, by playing Name the Goal Scorer. Rules for anyone that doesn't yet know, very simple. We'll play a clip from a notable Celtic goal, but the goal scorer's name has been beeped out from the commentary. All you have to do is name the goal scorer. Paddy, you've been setting the questions the last couple of weeks, a couple of good ones.
I never told the guests, the listeners, that's what they had to do.
All right.
So, sorry, guys.
They'll have it by now, I think. Before we kick on with this week's question, we'll reveal the answer from last week by playing the clip in full.
Larson with the free kick. Chris Sutton timed his jump well. John Hartson! Celtic have equalised! A brilliant finish from Hartson. 10 minutes from Hartson.
Fantastic.
Brilliant.
So, the goal in question, 12th of December 2002, Celta Vigo 2, Celtic 1, UEFA Cup third round, second leg, but Celtic won the first game, 1-0 at Celtic Park. Larson getting the goal, so we're throwing away goals. Miff, I'll come to you for your thoughts, because John Hartson was speaking recently. I think it was on Axum. He was talking about his pain at missing the final. It's his one big regret from Celtic. He played in all 12 games that led to the final, played a huge part, least of all that goal, his brilliant goal against Liverpool, his boyhood club, what a goal. He tells the story actually that I think his folks were there, his mum and dad were at the game, and effectively his mum was behind the goals to the point where had there been no net she could have just about caught the thing. What a moment that must have been for him. But yeah, as I say, he played in all the games, played a huge part, Miff, but ultimately had to miss the final against Porto due to that back injury. Could he have made a difference on the night?
Potentially, yeah, because he was in the form of his life on that, and sometimes you get that. A player on a run scores in most rounds, he's your sort of talisman. I know Larson was phenomenal on the night, but let's not talk about that. Let's not talk about
Not
that.
ready yet.
We don't like that night.
Any thoughts from you lads just in general on John Hartson and what he brought to Celtic?
Just loved him. I think particularly that night, you felt that you were on your way. You knew there was potential here. Tough game. You know the moaning they did about that, and it's like, well, just get back to Jimmy, be bigger than John Hartson. That's all you need to do.
Excellent use of a large derriere.
Aye. A class act. Just loved having about the big man. Yeah.
You know, I think he's one of those figures in Celtic history just now that he's done a lot of media work. I think he's put himself into quite a lot of positions, been on this show.
Used to be in this very studio.
Aye.
Oh, lovely boy.
I think for me, I actually think he's a wee bit underrated.
Or under-remembered.
Well,
Underremembered.
I was just going to say, right, he was that good that he split up Larson and Sutton.
Yeah.
That's how
some
good
job.
he was.
I thought he was
and that
excellent.
is, fair play to Anil for buying him in the first place when we already had Larson and Sutton, and let that be a lesson from history to show us that you bring in quality players and it propels you at a different level.
He had that knee issue.
improve.
You know the whole thing that he failed a medical at Rangers.
Yeah.
He was going to move there from
West Ham.
West Ham. And Martin O'Neill reached out to him personally and he was aware of the issues, and I think Hartson had like 4 or 5 failed medicals. And did we get him from Coventry, Gordon Strachan's Coventry at the time? And basically Martin O'Neill spoke to him and said, I think the quote is, unless you've got a hole in your heart, we're signing you, so don't worry about it, relax, I've got full faith in you. And he obviously repaid that faith and then some by coming to play for Martin O'Neill.
Did he actually medical? Did he have a full medical? Because I think O'Neill's was saying,
I think they just got him out to kick the goalpost a couple of times, do a couple of laps, and you're good to go.
Yeah, peeps and you're in.
But he had a huge impact. He scored so many big goals against Rangers as well, and I think just he played a huge part for Celtic, and we'll never know if he could have made a difference in that final. I think when he signed for Arsenal from Luton, he was Britain's most expensive teenager at the time. He was hugely rated, and obviously kind of found his feet at different clubs, but he was a massive part of Celtic under O'Neill.
He could hit a ball. He's just a natural finisher. Yeah, some great goals. When I went down to look for that goal, the amount I want John Hartson like compilations that come up. I watched a couple of them, and some of the goals he scored, especially against them, he loved the goal against them.
Natural goal scorer.
Great finisher.
Great stuff. Okay, let's take a listen to this week's goal scorer. Let's play the clip.
Well, gone on with 17 minutes, game still hasn't settled. Still too frantic out there, players still trying to get their breath, I suspect. Chris Commons though could make something happen now. Skips past Weir. Born to score!
You seem to have it, Miff.
Am I right in thinking we watched it in Las Vegas in your 30th?
We did.
Oh, nice.
So we're not getting into too much detail, but yeah, it was a 3-0 win against Rangers. And
I think my love for that particular player is well documented in this podcast.
That's why I was making eyes at you there. We watched it in the back of some seriously dodgy
Was it
casino.
6 in the morning or something?
It was pretty grim. Casino-wise game was brilliant. We'll get into it in more detail, but definitely a big favourite of Miff's here. You mouthed it to me, so we don't need to beep it out, but you definitely know who it is. Beep. As always, we'll reveal the answer in next week's show, and we'll also share the clip on socials for anyone that wants to have a go there. To see out the show, we'll be putting out our full match preview of the Atalanta game on Tuesday ahead of the 5:45 kick-off on Wednesday. But in short, I want to just ask you lads, while we're all here, how you think Brendan Rodgers will approach this. He got a lot of flack, I think deservedly. I think he has to take the responsibility for Dortmund, and given how it all played out there, and I know he was quite stubborn in his post-match, he wasn't pause up, he was saying this is how we play and all
Let's
that
get
stuff.
stuck into him.
Well, I'm going to come to you first, Paddy. You were there in Dortmund.
Yes.
A particularly sore one to take.
Yes.
So your thoughts on that, how we played that night, how we set up that night, and what you think Brendan Rodgers might do on Wednesday?
Far too open for European football, far too open for teams that are going to overload on the counter, and Dortmund have not had a great start so far. They top the Champions League format based on their goal difference. But I think for me, it shouldn't have happened. I think the team effectively down tools on the night. Probably after the third, fourth goal, I thought that was it. They had zoned out.
Do you think the players were disheartened by the system? It was just wave after wave at one point.
Yes, but what you need to then have is that faith in each other, and something like, I think as a captain, for me, Callum McGregor needs to say, this needs to stop. We need to stop the bleeding. And I didn't see that at any point. I just seen the dejection. And you can kind of, it's all right saying that comes from your manager telling you to change the system on the park. If you see that these things are happening, you break that. You come back in and take it to half time. You try and keep it 3-1.
I was going to ask, do you think that's acceptable for the player to effectively go against instruction?
It's not even going against instruction. It's generally just looking at, well, this is failing, and
We're getting pumped. Let's
we're
not get
getting
pumped.
absolutely destroyed here. But it just seemed as if, for me, all 11 players, they just down tools, because it was too exposed.
Do you mean down tools? I don't think it was down tools. I just think they get disheartened is the word you use there. Down tools is saying we're not playing anymore.
No.
It's more they went, this system, we're not going to beat this system as long as the manager keeps making us play their system. But I don't think they just chucked it or anything like that.
Well, I think they did chuck it. They conceded another 4 goals at 3.
I think they were still doing what they were being told to do, which is the issue, not the fact that they went, we're not playing anymore.
I know where you're coming from in terms of kind of keeping with a system, but for me, they just looked as if they weren't even wanting to chase down balls.
I think they were shell shocked.
Yeah, but you're in the Champions League, third season at it, and I'm not blaming the players. I'm not directly blaming the manager as well.
Yeah.
The mistakes were made. Sure. The result is a joke.
I think Nicholas Kuhn's performance kind of answered a few questions for me in terms of, it looked like he was under instruction to stay high and right.
Yes.
Clearly under instruction. To play 3 up front against a team who had made the Champions League final the season prior looks very folly now that we've got the benefit of the hindsight. But actually before the game, you'd think that would be mad as well in Dortmund. And I think Brendan Rodgers will tie knots in all of us, well, maybe not you, but most of us in terms of tactics. Surely a 4-5-1 type approach, which can very quickly become 4-3-3, might have been the more sensible way to go.
I think what's done is done. It's what happens next.
Yeah.
Well,
this
most
is
important.
This is the big question.
As far as that goes, if I'm being perfectly honest, all the time I'm at it with the Rodgers stuff, just because I can be stubborn, much like he can. But hopefully he's learned a lesson. I actually don't mind that he tried it.
No,
I don't mind that, because we were on the crest of a wave. If there was ever a time to try it, it was probably then, because we were the players were absolutely flying. But there could have been some game management and a bit of emotional intelligence in there to say, right lads, we just maybe need to draw stumps here and just make this as kind of difficult for them as possible. We didn't do that. We didn't make it difficult for them. And that's not to say, what's kind of been forgotten is we then continued to create clear-cut chances in the game. So did Dortmund. But so did we. We had really big chances, even at 7-1 down.
Chances,
So again, it comes back to that chance conversion thing that I was speaking about earlier. Like, the best way to kind of respond to these things is by scoring goals of our own. You know, if you're going to play that way, fine. But if you're playing in a way that's openly creating chances in a really difficult arena, we need the quality on the pitch to take them. So for me, there's loads of different sort of factors that contribute to it, but it's what comes next that's the most important. And whether that be the manager tactically learning from it, or even the players themselves managing the game properly, it'll be really, really interesting to see.
Yeah, and you know, in football you're going to have good experiences and bad experiences, but you've got to learn from each of them, and I think that's so important. And the frustration for me, I agree, I think you can understand why Rodgers is set up in such a way, but at 3-1 and certainly at 4-1 you need to go, game's a bogey, we're getting nothing out of this, we need to change it. We played the exact same way to the final whistle.
Yeah.
At no point did we change it, and had that game gone on 10 minutes longer, you might have been double figures. You know, it was so apparent to everybody in the arena, potentially out with the manager, how badly it was going.
And dare I say, of all the players that we've signed, of all the numbers that have been crunched, you know, of all the advice that we've taken from the football doctor, dare I say, probably the person that looks most equipped to play in these games, or that you would want on the pitch for these games, is Luke McCowan, based on the fact that he's going to cover ground, he's going to snap at heels, and he's actually got a bit of quality in the ball as well.
Is Luke McCowan due a start, Paddy?
Not for Wednesday, no.
No,
but not for me. I've listened to a few, and the boys in the group have suggested it. I think our captain needed more protection on the night, and I feel that how high up Engels and Rio were. Bernardo. Sorry, how high up they were. Again, if it's through instruction, it's poor tactics. It just left him far too exposed, and I've said on the show before, I think we Stevie made a very good point in the group chat that he's too weak to be left on his own, Cal McGregor, in that hole, and he's brushed off the ball far too easily. You need an enforcer in that position in those kind of games. I don't think we change it on Wednesday, and that's the bit that's filling me with concern.
Sorry, you're worried that he won't change. You think he should change it, but he won't change it.
I do think he should change it. I don't think he will.
This is kind of where I'm sitting just now. I'm a massive Brendan Rodgers fan. I just admire
Are you, mate? Aye.
everything he does football wise, but that was a big red flag, if you want to call it that, in terms of just as I say, just not changing it. Like, you can try things and you know, be bold and all that kind of stuff and see where you land, but the game was dead at 3-1. It was dead at 4-1, and we still never changed it, and that was really puzzling. And then you watch his comments, I don't know if it made you feel better or not, but you watch his comments thinking at least he can say, do you know what, we tried something, didn't work, we'll take lessons and we'll adjust for the next game. He wasn't speaking like that. And now, as we all know, managers can say one thing to the media and a completely different message behind the scenes. But I think I'm leaning towards where you're at, Paddy. I don't get the vibe he's going to change it.
His ego is rampant. That's what drives him on. You know, that's what his strength is, also his weakness. And in these situations when it needs a wee bit of pragmatism, I don't necessarily think we're going to get it.
I think we've been talking for a number of years now about the potential of this double pivot at Celtic. And I think, remember, was it Oliver Abelgard that came in, for example? We thought he was going to be the guy that might have sat next to Kalmack, and then we thought Iwata might have been the guy. And now I don't know if we think it might be Engels might be the guy, or Bernardo that can sit a bit deeper. But so far we've not gone for it. We've not played that system. And sure, Celtic shouldn't ever have to play a double pivot domestically, right? We're strong enough and we've got enough about us as an 11 in a 4-3-3 shape with two attacking midfielders to go and take care of business for the most part. But getting into Europe, James, it's a different arena, and I think we'd like to see him at least try. If we're going to experiment and try different things, some fans won't like hearing this, but this is a shot to nothing. You're up against the Europa League holders in Atalanta, a very good side. You're not expected to win. Can we go and try something that might develop us and put us in a better position for future games?
This is the key. So Rodgers makes that interview post-match kind of thing, and I agree he's made no sounds that that's not going to be the case on Wednesday night, but the approach I'm taking is I'm going to watch what people do rather than what they say, and the lineup for Wednesday is going to tell us everything we need to know about how we're going to approach Europe. I definitely want to see something more defensive and then be opportunistic in the attack.
Because we've got the players.
Absolutely, and they're fast enough.
Yeah.
I do think that involves McCowan. I think he's shown every single game he's played, he's showed a bit of drive, determination, a bit of invention, a bit of class. I think we're really missing it. I think he should start.
What was your quote, Miff, while I was away? Something about Badger said he plays like a guy that
a Celtic fan that's been offered the chance to play
in the most positive way. I think he's been excellent, but it's a huge up level, Paddy. He's been at Dundee. He said, I don't know, again, half a dozen games or so at Celtic. This is a massive step against a very good side, and it remains to be seen. Last question: should Adamida start up top instead of Kyogo? Give you an out ball, somebody to hold it up and let you get up the park?
No, he's not done anything to show he should be starting any game for Celtic at the moment.
Does an inform Adamida start? I know he's off at the moment.
Yeah, he's got a chance.
The talent he's got at his disposal.
Kyogo's still scoring goals.
Yeah.
We need to remember that. And Kyogo can score against any defence in the Champions League.
We need to involve him in the play.
I thought the way he held on with that pass for Hatate on Saturday without touching it. That was his first touch of the ball.
I know, it was great.
His second touch was a goal.
Just shows you that's the class we need. Listen, for me, it would be interesting to see if he still approaches the attack in the same way that we've been playing and going forward this season. But what he really needs to get his team clever at is that we are still seeing the likes of Greg Taylor and Alistair Johnson coming in to the inverted fullback. That's came back 100%, but it was non-existent in Dortmund, and I don't know what the idea was for that. The protection for that back line is a must. It's a must. They need to. The two wingers as well need to come back more. I thought Maeda did in Dortmund, but like you say, has that been an instruction for Nicholas Kuhn?
Came all the way back to set up a goal for him, so done well. See, to be fair, I think that's the most obvious point. What you just said there, Paddy, is that you know from playing that system that we played in Dortmund that it leaves the two centre halves not our strongest centre half pairing exposed,
not the quickest
up against it.
So therefore, the common sense approach to that would be let's protect him. Let's protect him, and if we need to sacrifice a wee bit going forward, then fine. I actually thought Hatate played really well when he came on.
A point to prove in a sense as well.
I thought he done really well, but that's another conundrum on the basis of he's maybe tired a bit after Saturday. Games maybe got to come soon after all that travelling. If Maeda's a wee bit
Maeda looks tired
as well, that's that's a big problem for us in the way we play.
McCown starting, yes or no?
He would for me, but I don't know who in place off. I don't know who it'd be.
Really? It's going to be really interesting. As I say, we'll do a preview tomorrow, Tuesday, and the team will come out, I don't know, 4:30ish on Wednesday. It's going to be very interesting, very telling as to what the approach will be. You might have heard that the ref is the same guy that sent off Lager Bielka and Odin Thiago home. Remember him?
Yeah,
cool. Against Feyenoord last year. It's a Bosnian fella. But last question, just to round this off and to round off the show in general. Can you see us getting any sort of positive result at all in Bergamo?
I'm not confident, but sometimes that's when they go and surprise us.
2-0 Celtic.
Yep.
I'm just going to say no, because I always fight my pessimism just for the sake of being on the podcast and go, it's alright guys, football and that's great, but I'm got to go, no, I don't think we will, just because I think it's got to be a really, really tough game.
Aye.
I want us to. I'll be praying that we do. I'll probably be a few halves deep before I watch the game. So it'll be, but yes, hope my boss isn't watching. So you know, it will be it'll be full taps off in the living room. Let's go for it. But I'm not hopeful.
Yeah. As long as it's your own living room, that's all right. James,
Desmond, sneaky draw, sneaky draw, 2 each.
Remember,
every week
you get dug up for saying we'd get 10 points out the next 12. Remember?
Did I not say we beat Dortmund 7-1?
Yeah, something like that. My honest answer is I just don't know. I think Celtic at their brilliant best,
this is your job,
and when they're counter-attacking and all that stuff. The 2 goals on Saturday were effectively counter-attacking goals, and we can break at pace. We've got real pace in the team, so you just never know. But if we approach it in the same way, and I mean it's going to sound so obvious, we get beat 7-1. If we do the same thing, we'll get hammered. But if there's lessons learned and potential tweaks to the game, then you never know. Paddy, I'll come to you for your final thoughts of the week.
I'm excited for the game on Wednesday. It's always a joy to be in this tournament and play it, but it's not great. It's not great coming into the back of that game against Dortmund, but I think the players, hopefully even after the result on Saturday, will just be looking to just restart the season a little bit.
See, just on that, a game against Aberdeen like that on Saturday is far better than hammering St Johnstone 6-0.
Correct.
Absolutely.
I would agree
correct.
with you, because it's the kick up the backside that they need.
Yeah.
So I think that the preparation will be massive in the next few days. We'll wait and see him Wednesday. I do still think he'll try and line up the same. If he changes it and we go and we get a result, then he's answered a lot of questions for himself. Yeah. I think I'm with you, though. I think the ego can be too much in these moments, but he does need to refer back to some of the big results that we've had absolute hidings in Europe, because he's just been too stubborn.
Yeah.
And that's my worry for Wednesday.
I think it's a massive night for Brendan Rodgers in terms
Yeah.
of his credibility in Europe at Celtic.
Yes. Listen, Paddy makes an excellent point. Sometimes you just need to take a wee step back and go, look, we're here. We should be very thankful we're getting to compete at this level. But what isn't enjoyable about it is getting absolutely pumped. So what we want is we want to see a performance which is an improvement on the Dortmund performance, but just have us competing. You know, if you end up coming away and getting beat 2-0,
Yeah.
but you've competed in the game and you've seen a structure in the team that gives you a bit of hope for going forward, I think that's what we want to see. There were small elements of the Dortmund performance which weren't absolutely hopeless, but it's just having that wee bit of nous, which you would hope by now, given the experience that managers now had in the competition and some of the players have had, we would have enacted in the Dortmund game. We didn't. That's done. It's what we do from now on.
That's true. And you're right, the manager and several of the players have got decent Champions League experience under the belt. This isn't brand new to a lot of them, so you'd hope there's lessons that have been learned. James, final word goes to you.
Just your very last phrase there, lessons to have been learned. I think it's really unfair on players to put them out in a system that leaves them that exposed, because Trusty gets a hard time, but then you look at how far away McGregor is, and McGregor gets a hard time, you look how far away his two midfielders are, and then you look at your two fullbacks and they're way up the park. So you've got to really give us a fighting chance.
I don't know why we never get us out.
Champ manager just sacking you like it's getting after lap.
Out. So, and we are never going to be Craig Levein, Waller Smith, 4-6-0, 4-5-1, whatever kind of thing, 5-5-0. We're always going to be an attacking football team, but you can do that whilst being robust at the back.
Yeah.
And I think we've just got to show that. If we don't show that, it shows we're not maturing as a team, and that points back to the manager, which is an issue.
Yeah, as I say, a huge night for Brendan Rodgers. But that wraps things up on this latest Celtic Exchange Weekly. Thanks to Miff, James and Paddy, and thanks to you for tuning in. We'll be back this week with pre- and post-match shows for that one against Atalanta on Wednesday, as well as Sunday's league game against Motherwell at Fir Park. And don't forget to check out the CelticExchange.supercast.com, where you can help us bring you even more Celtic this season. But in the meantime, as always, thanks for tuning in. We'll see you again soon.